Hey, good afternoon and welcome along to the Packed Coffee Instagram live channel once again. Sorry, YouTube live channel once again. I'm going to start today by asking all of you a quick favor. Right now we have about 450 subscribers. It would really help us if we could get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you could please subscribe to the channel, it's going to allow us to produce much higher quality content. And hopefully make the videos even better for you. So please just click on the subscribe button now. Add any comments as we go through. But if you could subscribe, it's really going to change the quality of the video we're able to produce and hopefully mean you get a much better experience from these videos. So thank you very much for doing that. Also, tell your friends, anyone that can help us get up to the subscription numbers will be really helpful. Okay, so we've got the setup today. Today we're going to be talking about how to make. Sorry, we're just going to angle the camera down just a little bit so you can see everything. I think I've just nudged that as we've been going a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, this is why we need those subscribers. A little bit of help with the subscribers is going to mean we can produce much better content and make sure that I can always get the camera in the right place. Okay, so today we're going to be doing a masterclass on Aeropress. For that, we're going to need your Aeropress. I'm going to be doing 3 Aeropress run-throughs today, but given how easy it is to clean the Aeropress, I'm only going to need the one. I need my Aeropress filter papers, plenty of, my Aeropress funnel, stirrer, scoop, and today I'm actually going to be using the V60 jug, which does very neatly fit the Aeropress. So what I've done today is start by grinding off some of the Casa Loma Pink Bourbon variety coffee, which we released just last week. It's sold out really fast. I had been hoping that you guys would be able to go online to buy some of this, but unfortunately you're not going to be able to. Later on, I'm going to have a sneak peek of some limited edition coffee. It's going to become available next week, which I hope you're going to really enjoy. Okay, so here's my Casa Loma Pink Bourbon. What I want to touch on today in this masterclass is some of the videos, some of the techniques used in the World Aeropress Championships. Now, this might sound like a crazy thing to you, but annually for the past decade, there have been championships over who in the world can make the best coffee with an Aeropress. What happens during that championship is that each competitor is given a 250-gram bag of coffee. They're allowed to do some test brews with the coffee, work out what their recipe is going to be, but normally they're going to come into the competition with a specific brewing technique that they want to use to try and make the coffee as well as possible. Now, looking back through various of the winning combinations, one thing has really stood out. It's quite different from the way that we would traditionally recommend that you brew an Aeropress at home. And that thing is the temperature at which the champions have all won. Now, lots of the winners, including Paulina, who was the English champion in 2018, went on to become the world champion. She worked at Caffeine, which is a coffee shop in central London. Absolutely lovely coffee shop. Do go along if you've got time, if you're in London, as soon as it reopens. Now, they all brewed their coffee at 80 degrees centigrade or close to 80 degrees. What you tend to see across the decade is champions winning with coffee brewed at 75 to 85 degrees centigrade. And although the brew ratio they're using changes, in the early part, the brew ratio tended to be about 20 grams of coffee into the Aeropress with around 180 to 200 milliliters of water. And as we've moved slightly further through time, there's been a bit of a change, which I'm going to talk to you about in the third brew that we're going to do today. So I'm going to start today by doing kind of a mix of some of the recipes that have been used in the past. Those recipes, as I said, all use water at 80 degrees centigrade. So I've preheated my kettle. They're sitting, waiting at 80 degrees centigrade. Once I've used the water in that, I'm then going to be bringing it up to 95 degrees centigrade so that I can do a brew the way that we recommend it, packed with exactly the same coffee with our brew method, and we can taste those two coffees side by side. Okay, so I'm going to crack on straight away. I just need to pull my cups into shot. So these are ready to go. Now, as I said, I'm gonna be doing these all the inverted method, just because although you do have to be very careful, you don't allow this to fall over or the plunger doesn't come out the bottom, it does, for me, give a much more consistent brew. So I'm going to be using the inverted method for both brews. I'm going to tap my scales there. I've got my Casa Loma Pink Bourbon that was available on the website. It's a very special variety, Pink Bourbon, that's been grown by Napoleon Suarez. He's the son of Ramiro Suarez, who owns Casa Loma. We've been working with him for the past 5 years now, and Napoleon has really got excited about coffee recently. Spoke to his dad about planting some of this fairly new variety and quite a risky variety to grow in Colombia because it doesn't have any resistance to some of the diseases that occur there, but very exciting to be able to buy some. We've recommended they continue with the resistant varieties, which gives them more of a chance at sustainability over the long term. But we've committed to buy this coffee from them because it's a passion project for Napoleon, and the results have been delicious. So absolutely fantastic coffee, and I hope some of you managed to get your hands on it. What I've done is I've ground enough coffee for both my brews at the same time, because I don't want any change in the grind or any change in an individual coffee bean that's happened here to influence the difference between these two coffees when I taste them. It's going to be much like what happens when you buy a bag of ground coffee from packed at home. You should get much more consistency across that bag of coffee, and it should be nice and tasty. Right, so I've got my Aeropress scoop here. I'm going to be dosing 18 grams of coffee into here, and I'm going to be doing 18 grams for both brews. Take my scoop. I'm going to drop my funnel in. As I said last time, the funnel is key here. I do need to tear having done that. Drop your funnel in because you don't want to be getting any coffee in the thread of your Aeropress. Next, I'm going to drop my coffee in here. So 13.1. A little bit more difficult doing this upside down than normal. There we go, 18 grams. And we are ready to roll with that. So my funnel comes out. Next, I'm going to drop my Aeropress my Aeropress filter into the Aeropress filter basket here. And I'm just going to quickly run that under the tap to make sure it's all flushed through nicely. Now that quick rinse is going to allow us to close up the gaps in the Aeropress, stop any absorption of coffee oils that we want in the cup by the Aeropress filter, but also to make sure we've rinsed off any paper that might be on the Aeropress filter from the point that it was cut. So that is now ready to go. As I said, I've got my water over here, and I'm just going to prepare my timer. Okay, so I've got my timer ready to go, so we haven't got to rely on the one on the scales this week. Water is at 80 degrees. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'll be pouring the water into the Aeropress. I'm going to be pouring to the level number 2. I'm going to be stirring it for 15 seconds. Once I've stirred it for 15 seconds, I'm then going to add the rest of my 200 milliliters of total brewing water. So I need to start by just tearing the scales to make sure I can get my volume correct. So I'm going to stir quite vigorously here. Now, the reason for doing that is to make sure we're saturating every ground of coffee with water. The ground coffee is full of air, and ideally what it wants to do is clump and it wants to float. So by stirring it vigorously for the, sorry, I've not got my timer visible right now. Stirring for this 15 seconds, making sure we've really saturated every coffee ground with water. Now you can see I've got a bit of a wonk on my Aeropress now, so I'm just going to straighten that up. The last thing I want is for this to fall over. Coffee everywhere, coffee over me. Do keep an eye on it. You don't want to burn yourself. Okay, so next we can top it up to get to that 200 milliliter level. There we go. I've got a touch over there, 204, which isn't ideal. But what you should see now is because we've really saturated the coffee grounds with water, as we've added 200 mils of water there, if you hadn't done that stirring phase, what you'd find is you have all the coffee sat on top of the water because it's still full of air and it isn't dense enough to sink down. Because we've given it a really good stir at the beginning there, the water and the coffee are really nicely mixed. There's plenty of room for me to work at the top with the water. And I'm not going to get it overflowing. So that's really nice. I'm now at 1 minute 16, so I can put my filter paper on top. I'm going to drop my cup on top of that and do my entire spin. And that is good to go. Now, many of the recipes recommend that you're plunging for between 30 seconds and about 60 seconds. There are some recipes that push all the way up to 75 seconds. What I would recommend, the key thing that most of them say is not to push through the hiss at the bottom. And if you've been brewing Aeropress before, you might have found that as you push through the bottom, there's a lot of coffee, there's a lot of water sat in the puck of coffee that sits at the bottom of your Aeropress. So by holding back and not pushing through that, so as soon as I hear the hiss, I'm going to stop. We're just going to avoid taking the water that's been sat in that coffee for slightly longer out. So I'm just gently pushing through still. So just whilst I'm finishing this, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments section. Okay, and I can just begin to hear that hiss. So I've stopped pushing there. Slightly pull the bottom of your Aeropress out, turn it upside down. Now there is going to be a little bit more water in here than with the traditional pack method. So do make sure you pull back. Be careful, that is going to be hot. That's ready to go for our next brew. Now, one of the really interesting things that you see in a lot of the recipes from the World Championships is that from this point on, there are recipes that add hot water to this brew. So we're sat with the brew at 80 degrees centigrade, and what lots of the recipes are doing is brewing slightly stronger and then using fresh water from the kettle, hot water from the kettle, to slightly dilute the brew that we've made. Now, I'd recommend having a quick taste of this. I'm actually going to grab a cabinet spoon out of my drawer here, because it's going to allow me to taste the coffee whilst it's still a little hotter than I can taste it brewed. Now, we've brewed at 80 degrees centigrade, so it's 80 degrees centigrade. So it shouldn't be anywhere near as hot as a standard coffee, but it is still going to be pretty warm. So this coffee has quite a strong TDS, total dissolved solid content. It's very rich, and you can feel the mouthfeel is very heavy. It's a little bit more difficult for the flavors to get up around your olfactory bulb, but it is tasting absolutely delicious. What we can do, so I'm just going to tear my scales using this bowl, and my balls aren't exactly the same weight, but they are pretty close. So here I've got 159 or 160 milliliters of coffee. What I'm going to do is just add 10 mils of hot water to this. So I've gone slightly long there and gone 13 mils. Give it a tiny stir and have a second taste. Now what that's doing is decreasing the dissolved solid content. I'm adding water, that's separating out all the particles that are in the coffee. It means for every few milliliters of coffee that I drink, I'm getting less particles on my tongue. But it should also be allowing the volatile aromatics out of the liquid quicker. So one more taste. It's tasting good, it's tasting better. I think we can go once again. So I'm going to add another 15 mil. So we end up with a total of 30 mil. Oops. So there we go. And one more taste. And what we should find is this has opened up quite considerably. It has. It's really opened up now. Now, you've got to be careful you don't go too far with this, but it's a really interesting way to taste this coffee across multiple brew ratios. That's the ratio of ground coffee you've used to hot water, by slightly watering it down and really opening it up. It's tasting really delicious, but the next thing we need to do is compare that directly to the packed coffee brew method. Now, we've had a question from Daniel, so I'm going to start working on the packed coffee brew method, but answer questions at the same time. If you have any questions, do drop them in the comments section. Daniel has asked, if you don't have a temperature control kettle, like the sage kettle I've got behind me, how could you control or measure the temperature of the water you're using? Now, there are a few ways you could do it. So you could just simply, if you're not worried about being 100% accurate, you could boil your water and allow it to sit. Now, we know by leaving a plastic kettle 30 seconds or a plastic kettle 1 minute or a metal kettle 30 seconds, we're going to see a drop off in temperature of around about 5 degrees centigrade. So if you extrapolate that out, if you leave your plastic kettle for about 1.5 minutes and you leave your metal kettle for 1 minute to 1 minute and 15, you're probably going to see a drop off quite considerably in temperature towards the 80 degree mark. If you want to make a small investment, and I would recommend this for all of your cooking at home, you can buy a digital thermometer. You can pick them up at IKEA for about £8, on Amazon for about the same. Now, they have very accurate temperature probes with them, and that will enable you to check the temperature of your hot water all the way through your brewing. Very, very cheap way to be able to control the temperature of your coffee brewing, but also really fantastic for cooking meat at home or wherever else you're cooking. Check the temperature of your oven. It's really going to increase the quality of your home production if you get one of those. That's enough of the adverts for IKEA and Amazon. Okay, so moving back onto the packed video, we're going to be using the 16 grams of ground coffee here, so that's 14. Okay, gone 16.1 there, so pretty close. Just need to set my kettle up to boil this time. So just whilst we're waiting for the kettle there, Tim has asked if he wants to make a coffee with 2 people with Aeropress, could he potentially make it double strength and water it down? Now this actually comes, it's actually linking in nicely to the next brew we're going to do. You might be able to see here I've got a pot of ice. So for the next brew, I'm going to be using 35 grams of coffee in the Aeropress. And I'm going to be using my ice to water it down. So I'll be making an iced coffee using that. But you can use the same method and use hot water. So you could use 36 grams of coffee in your Aeropress. Follow a fairly similar brew method. We're going to be using water at more like 85 degrees centigrade for that. And then we'll be watering it down afterwards, in this case with ice. But if you're doing it at home, you could be using hot water as well to split that out into 2 cups. Okay, so our coffee is in. Our filter paper needs a rinse. Our hot water is ready there. So just need to empty some of this water out of the ice. And we are good to go. So again, we're going 200 mils. I've allowed it to sit for a little while. I need to start my timer. So what you're going to see on this brew is quite considerably more bloom. The bloom is the effect of the dissolved air, the dissolved carbon dioxide in the coffee coming out. So I'm going to give it a good stir now. Go back here, and I'm just going to set this back up 85 degrees for our next brew. And that's just going to track the temperature as it cools down, so we know we're ready to brew our next brew. We've been brewing for 38 seconds here. I've given my stir for 10 seconds already. My filter paper is ready to go on the top. All in all, this is a slightly less involved brew. We're using water a lot closer to 100 degrees, so a little bit easier for you to do at home. We're at 1 minute, so I'm going to screw this on the top. Cup goes on top. Being very careful now. We don't want to get hot water and coffee everywhere. We flip and begin pushing down. We want to be pushing down within 15 to 30 seconds of starting. What we're going to see here is a total brew time of closer to 1 minute 30, where the first brew was maybe 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30. Gently push down, and we are going to push through the hiss here. Make sure we get all the water out. So Kelly's just asked in the Aeropress Championship what actually constitutes a winning brew. Now, I am actually an Aeropress World Championships judge. So when we're judging the Aeropress World Championships, much like we're doing here, each of the competitors might use their own brew method, but they all have to use the same coffee. So as a judge, we're tasting probably 20, 25 times through the heat stages and then the finals, the same coffee brewed over and over again, and we're trying to find out which of the competitors is able to best bring out the unique characteristics that exist within that coffee because of the place it's grown, because of the people that have grown it, and because of the way it's been roasted. So what we're looking for is we have completely blind. So we get three different competitors' coffee delivered to us at the same time. We don't know which one's which, and we taste all three. We have a talk through why we like each one, and then on the count of three, we say 1, 2, 3, and we point at the cup we like the best. And that cup makes it through to from the heats to the semi-finals to the finals, and eventually we end up with a winner, completely based on the taste of the coffee. We don't get to see what the exact method that's been used is. All we're doing as judges is tasting and saying this is the best that we're tasting from these groups, and ideally the best ones go through. What is interesting though is that using that method of judging, we've actually seen the similarity come through of this brew method, which uses water heated to 80 degrees rather than a traditional 90, 95 degrees. Okay, so this time the coffee I've brewed is going to be quite a lot hotter than the 80 degrees one. So do need to be careful. That's why using a cup and spoon is really going to help. It increases the surface area of the coffee that I'm about to drink, which means by the time it gets to my mouth, it should be a little bit cooler. I'm going to slurp it, and hopefully I won't burn my tongue. So this coffee has got significantly more mouthfeel to it. It's really punchy. I'm also getting a bit of bitterness to it. If I compare it to this one over here, it's much thinner, even in comparison to the brew before I started adding water to it. It's much lighter, more delicate. This is heavier, richer. It's almost got a savory kind of umami characteristic to it that goes along with that delicious sweetness it has. I'm getting, between the two, I'm getting really bright acidity. I'd say the acidity here is more, in the packed brew, is more pronounced, more intense. The acidity in this new brew method is slightly more balanced, slightly lower. I'd say that the packed brew brings out a bit more of the citrus in the acidity, whereas this we'll call it the World Championship brew, a little bit lighter, potentially not quite so, maybe tropical citric in the packed brew, and slightly more citrus fruit. So if you think ripe tangerines and mandarin in the World Championship brew. Both really delicious, both really good example of what the coffee can taste like. I'm seeing the same characteristics across both, but also it's a really nice display of the difference that you might see at home in comparison to the taste notes you read that I've written on the coffee cards that come with these coffees. So I've written notes of peach, raisin, and nutmeg to go with this coffee. What you might find brewing this coffee elsewhere in the UK with different water, with a slightly different grind setting, or slightly different brew ratios, or slightly different water, slightly different brew temperatures, is that your taste notes differ ever so slightly from what I'm saying, what I'm suggesting. That doesn't mean that you're tasting things that are wrong. Everyone should have their own opinion and their own preference when it comes to tasting and drinking coffee. But hopefully they fall, like we've just found here, within about the same ballpark, and you should be able to buy coffees that you like. The taste notes of, say, peach, raisin, and nutmeg. If you see another coffee on a website that has those taste and flavor notes, and you've liked one in the past, hopefully you should be reassured that you're going to enjoy that one this time. Okay, so I'm going to put these coffees to one side for now, and we're going to begin moving on to the slightly different method, which I touched on just a moment ago answering that question. So I've brought my Harrier brew jug here into shot, and prior to starting today, I've just got, it was 200 milliliters of ice out of the freezer. It's been sat out on the counter, so it has heated up a little bit. I've discarded some of the water because I need to use all the cool properties it has to cool this coffee down nice and quick. So I'm going to start by just weighing out my water into the bottom here, because I do want to make sure I'm getting a perfect brew. I'm going to use my phone for this actually. So we've got 154 milliliters or grams of ice in here. I was hoping for 200 total. I'm going to be using 200 milliliters of hot water in my Aeropress today. So that means I'm going to be adjusting my brew ratio ever so slightly. So where I said I was going to use 36 grams earlier on, I'm going to reduce that down slightly, because our total volume of coffee at the end now is going to be closer to 360 rather than 400 milliliters of coffee, or total brew liquid. So that's our kettle saying it's ready. We're at 85 degrees centigrade. I don't know if you can hear the rain that just started outside the window. I might have to close the door. It's getting pretty loud. So I'm going to be using 34 grams, and I'm going to be using Senna Cafe 1. So just give me 1 second whilst I check that in the grinder. So putting our Senna Cafe 1. This is a limited edition coffee which will be which we will be launching next week back onto the website. Now I'm aware this is pretty loud for you guys, so I'm not going to say anything whilst this is turned on. I can't get anything to say, but okay, so that's our 35 grams approximately. I'm going to weigh out of coffee once again. Okay, so I think we have a question about smart kettles that can be controlled by your phone or by voice, from James. Thanks for the question, James. So I don't actually have any experience with a smart kettle that can be controlled by your phone or your voice. I've always used a Sage kettle with the temperature control on it. And sorry, I haven't even glanced at reviews, to be honest. I kind of fell in love with this kettle a few years ago and haven't really looked at anything else on the market since. Okay, so funnel into the top of our Aeropress. This time we're going to be using 34 grams of coffee, as I just said. And we know the temperature of the kettle is already down to 85 and it's on keep warm, so we should get our brewing out. Just whilst I'm doing this, I did just want to remember, I don't know if you caught it at the top, it would be really helpful for us if you could please subscribe to the Pat Coffee YouTube channel. It's really going to help us be able to increase the quality of the videos we're sending out. And we just need to try and get to 1,000 subscribers. So if all of you on today could subscribe and tell your friends about the video, show them how to run Aeropress, but also really help us along with the future quality of the videos we produce. Okay, so there's our funnel coming out. I need to put my new Aeropress filter in and give that a rinse. Okay, so my filter paper's in, my water's at 85 degrees centigrade. Now, just bear in mind now, when you're putting your 200 milliliters of water in, you've got quite considerably more coffee in there, which is already taking up volume. So we will be adding a small amount of water, stirring to really saturate those grounds, and then pouring again, and we should get all the water in there pretty well. But just be cautious that you don't overfill the Aeropress whilst looking at the weight at the bottom, and do make sure you've given yourself enough room, but also make sure the plunger is far enough into your Aeropress so that it doesn't leak out the bottom. Okay, hot water ready to go. I'm going to just prep my timer at the same time. And start. So enough water in there just to allow us to give it a good stir. So this coffee is Senecafe 1. It's a completely new variety, and we are the first people in the world to be allowed to export it. It's seriously exciting. It's been developed specifically by the Colombian government to help farmers better be able to produce high quality coffee with all the problems that are currently occurring in Colombia in terms of production, which include a few diseases which have actually wiped out coffee production in other countries in the past. Some of you may or may not know that coffee was originally produced in Sri Lanka, although now it's more widely known for tea production. It had its entire coffee production wiped out a couple of 100 years ago by a disease called Roya, and that disease has spread globally now. In 2012, there was a massive problem with it so I've just given that a stir. There's a massive problem with it in El Salvador, and that's reduced current coffee production in El Salvador to about 10 to 20% what it was previously. And it's been an ongoing battle in Colombia. Senecafe, which is the name of the coffee, but also the name of the Agricultural Research Institute in, sorry, I'm gonna have to flip this without putting a lid on it, so don't do this at home, kids. And give it a push. So Senecafe have been developing rust-resistant varieties for decades, and this is a rust-resistant variety which has very specifically been developed to have high resistance to rust, but also extremely high cup quality. Over the last 5 years, we've been involved in the development, tasting the coffee as it goes through, helping to choose those plants that have the highest quality. And now, 2 years ago, coffee farmers that we work with were chosen to be the first farms to have the coffee tested out on, because they're regarded with such high regard by the Colombian government, by people that work in coffee in Colombia, and as such, those farms have sold us this coffee. So this is the first one. It's come from El Paraíso. El Paraíso is just around the corner from Casa Loma, and Orlando has done a fantastic job of growing it. Only 10 bags were produced. We have shipped the first 10 bags of single at Casa Loma out of Colombia this year. And as far as I know, there's not much else coming. So in the entire world, there are maybe 2,250 gram bags of this. They are all coming from Pact. We now have the last 300 of these, 600, I think, to sell next week. It's an exceptionally good quality coffee, but also this is a part of history. You will see this variety become probably one of the most important varieties in coffee production over the next 10 or 20 years. And this is an opportunity to say you were one of the first people in the world to taste it. To put it into wine terms, it's the equivalent of being the first person to get to crack the cork on a bottle of Chardonnay or Merlot a couple of 100 years ago. It's a really important part of history, and I really hope you get to grab a bag and enjoy it. Okay, so now I've got my coffee nice and cold. I'm going to swirl around this jug. I'm using the cup that I had my ice in, so that's nicely pre-chilled. I can pour this and it's ready to go straight away. So I'm actually going to line this up now to be able to do a direct comparison with the other brew methods. Now I'm using a different coffee, so obviously there will be slight differences, but this coffee, so much acidity, so much bright, fresh acidity. It's absolutely delicious. It's almost like eating a slice of fresh grapefruit. It's absolutely stunning. I look surprised by this. I should know this is a fantastic coffee and shouldn't be so surprised, but it's just so good. I'm really excited that you're all going to get to taste it next week. The brew method has really unlocked the clarity in the coffee. And I'm not sure it's whether it's because we brewed it over ice. But it's exciting. You're just going to have to give me a minute with this. It's so good. In comparison to the World Championship brew, I'm seeing a similar level of balance, but everything is brighter, fresher, you could say more zesty. Really, really interesting coffee. I absolutely love it. So I'm just going to check in. Any more questions this week? So Jackson just asked, how does the Aeropress compare to other brew methods in terms of everything really, but including mouthfeel? Now, what we tend to see on the Aeropress is, and as I've mentioned as we've kind of gone through here, brewing at 95 degrees, we've got great mouthfeel. I would say this is at 95 degrees, this is comparable to a cafetiere. The advantage the Aeropress has over the cafetiere is these paper filters. Now, because we're using a paper filter rather than a metal filter, we're getting a really high quality and high intensity mouthfeel because we're able to grind nice and fine, because the paper filter will take lots out. But the paper filter is also blocking most of the fines that end up in the cup, which actually create that kind of silty mouthfeel, which can often accompany a high mouthfeel coffee. So here we're getting a nice high mouthfeel coffee without that siltiness. We've got really nice acidity in here, as I said before, and we've managed to show through these 3 different brew methods, you can really manipulate that if you want to play around with different things. So the acidity, really great. And for me, the most important thing about the Aeropress is that the filter paper really enhances the aromatic volatility of the coffee, and it means all those flavor notes that I keep wanging on about on the coffee cards actually come through a lot more clear when you brew in a cafetiere or other brew method of mocha pot, or even sometimes espresso, because we're clearing out some of those lipids and some of those fine bits of coffee. So you should get really high clarity on delicious, tasty flavor notes. I'm just going to check for. So one more question from Kelly. What's the benefit of the inverted method? So the benefit of our inverted method is, if we are brewing with our Aeropress upside down as such, I'm just going to take our plunger. So as you can see, if I have this up this way up, I put my coffee in, I put my water in. Now if I start pouring my water in and start stirring, gravity is going to start pulling the water through the filter before I've really started brewing. Now I want to make my Aeropress a total immersion brew, which means I want all of my water and all of my coffee sat together at the same time. If I've allowed some of the water to drop through into the bottom of the brew method before the brewing has really started, then that means I've changed my brew ratio unintentionally and uncontrollably. So I can't repeat that process time and time again. The trick to making really great coffee is making your brew method as repeatable as possible, so that when you want to change something, say your brew water temperature or your grind size, you know that you're only changing one variable. So by brewing using the inverted method, we're able to make sure that we're always using the same volume of water for the brewing against the same volume of coffee, or change that if we want to, without changing anything else. So thank you very much for tuning in today. Please do subscribe. It's really, really going to help us increase the quality of these videos over time. And I really look forward to seeing you again. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments box, and I will make sure I look back and answer any of them in text. But for now, I'll say goodbye and look forward to seeing you again very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.